the March 26, 2018 meeting of the Planning Commission to order. We'll begin with the roll call of the commissioners present.
Barch.
Yes.
Burning.
Yes.
Bollinger.
Yes.
Demakis.
Yep.
Hanson.
Yes.
Karpenko.
Yes.
Keller.
Yes.
Coop. Lartius. Neither.
Yes.
Wagnus.
Yes.
Wetzler.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, commissioners, need a motion for the approval of the February 26th regular meeting minutes. Got a motion on the floor and a second. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Burning. Bollinger. Yes. Demakis.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Karpenko.
Yes.
Keller.
Yes.
Neither.
Yes.
Wagnus.
Yes.
Wetzler. Barch.
Yes.
Motion to approve the minutes is carried. For those in attendance, there are no agenda items on the consent list, so all applications will have a public hearing. We'll begin with agenda item number 1. This is an application by Pam Keller to change the zone from R1, single-family residential district, to manufactured home district in order to keep an existing manufactured home on Keys amended plat, block 6, lot 3 and 4. Also for a variance to the rear yard setback from the required 10 feet to approximately 6.8 feet on Keys amended plat, block 6, lot 3 and 4. The property is located at 1004 39th Street Southeast. I'll turn it over to city staff for comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, commissioners. This first item is a request for a zone change. Here you can see the vicinity map with major highways, East Burdick and the East Bypass, and the red star marks the location of the site. Here it is zoomed in. You'll see a single wide manufactured home on a residential lot of zone R1. That structure was moved in 2011 in relation to a special use permit that was issued by the City Council. City Council issued a permit for that unit to be moved in for a 5-year period, and so in 2016, it expired, and the city didn't know about it until the assessors caught it. And so we had a meeting with the folks in the last fall, that lived there to talk about where we go from here. And it's interesting that the SUP was issued because we could find no records of other similar manufactured homes getting these kinds of permits. So I don't know what the logic was at the time. Obviously, it was right after the flood, and there was a lot of hectic things going on. But in terms of the solutions that might be possible, we talked about one would be to move off the lot and find another place, which the folks that live there would rather not do. Second would be perhaps to rezone it. Third would be to seek a variance, and the city doesn't consider use variances. So if a use isn't allowed in a certain district, then a variance to allow that use is not a proper protocol. So really the rezoning, other than moving the trailer, is the avenue that staff had discussed. And you see here, the zoning in this neighborhood is R1. Manufactured homes are only allowed in manufactured home zones today. At some point in the past, they were allowed in other places, especially after the flood. And so there are several manufactured homes in this general vicinity, 36 of them, I think, within 2-block radius of the subject site. You see the subject site there in blue, and all the red stars are other manufactured housing. In the upper right corner, where that cul-de-sac comes down, that is manufactured home zoning, but the rest of it is pretty well R1. So I'm not sure how those other units got there without a special use permit, but that was what these folks had to do back in 2011. The other thing that's shown here, staff suggested to them that they talk to the neighbors, since they've been in this location for more than 5 years, that people are used to them being there, and they probably either are okay with that or not okay with it. So we suggested they go talk to the neighbors with a petition in support of them being able to remain at this location. So on the same slide, you see all the green ovals represent petitioners that signed in support of allowing us to remain have not had any opposition that I know of that's called or sent letters in asking that it be moved. And I will say, out of the petitioners, the petition that was presented, there were like 47 signatures, but I could only find the ones that are shown in green by address as being close to this site. The other sites were in other parts of town. I don't know if those were absentee landlords, perhaps. It's not clear, but I can tell you that the green ones shown here did, in fact, sign that petition in support. The second issue is the variance, and you can see again the site itself is only 60 by 90, and the home takes up most of the site. There's no way you could even turn it the other direction. And a 10-foot rear yard is required. It's located at 6.8 feet, so a 3.2-foot rear yard variance would be required for it to remain where it is. One of the conditions that the council talked about back in 2011 was that it needed to be on a permanent foundation. And so if the rezoning is approved, then staff feels that we need to verify whether it is on a permanent foundation or not. So one of the questions that might come up is the issue of spot zoning, because certainly in the middle of R1 there, to zone this to MH would be a spot. But there are quite a bit of examples, just even in this neighborhood, you can see where there's some parcels that differentiate from what's around them, single parcels in a lot of cases, and don't know how that happened or what the reasoning was. Spot zoning is, generally when we do zoning, it's always a spot. It just depends on how big of a spot it is. And so the fact that these folks are kind of receiving preferential treatment is something to consider, I guess, from what the neighbors have. But again, staff's reliance in this fact is, or in this case, is with it having been there for a while. Are the neighbors okay with it? There are quite a few other modular house or manufactured homes in the neighborhood. So depending on if there's opposition tonight or not, the planning commission can decide whether they feel it's appropriate to follow through with this rezoning. So findings of fact, permit expired. The recommendation is to approve the rezoning if it's supported by the neighborhood, and also to support the variance request if it's going to remain there. And again, I think the foundation should be checked by the building department if it's going to stay there, make sure it's permanently anchored the way it's supposed to be. So if you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Lang, commissioners? I do have one question. How many other instances are there in this area of manufactured homes?
Well, there's, according to the code enforcement officer, she said there was 36 within 2 blocks of this site, and with 6 of those probably be modular homes. Modular homes would be allowed.
Sure.
So if you move that, there'd be 30. There'd be at least 30 within 2 blocks.
And those are zoned residential as well?
They're zoned R1, except in the upper right-hand corner where this cul-de-sac comes down. This is manufactured homes, and this is all R1.
Perfect. So we might run into this over the next 20, 30 years.
You can see here.
Some fashion.
See the zoning up there is MH, but all this over here is yellow R1.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Lang?
Just clarification, did you recommend permanent foundation, Lance?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Lang? We'll open the public hearing, and I'll ask, is the applicant on the audience that would like to speak on behalf of this application? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience that would like to, oh, please come forward.
They have went around and spoke to their neighbors. This is Pam Keller, I'm her sister.
Sure.
I had a manufactured home that was put down there at the same time right after the flood on a similar lot, except for the home I had put in down there was a double wide home, so there was not an issue with it. But the lot that they sit on is a 30 by 30 lot. And when we went and met with Mr. Lang, and when they got their notification about this, we discussed that too, that the lot had been vacant for a number of years. It's not big enough to put anything else on. You couldn't even possibly build a house on it due to the fact of the size of the lot that it is. And the house that they moved in down there, they had went, and it's a newer, it's a 2000 model home. They've talked to their neighbors, and due to the size of the lot, when we discussed it with them, they had even said at the time that it wouldn't be possible to put anything else in on there because it's too small.
Okay. Any questions, commissioners? Do you have any problem with the conditions set forth by city staff?
No,
Okay. Any questions, commissioners? Seeing none, hang tight. Thanks.
thank you.
Is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak either in favor or in opposition of this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Oh, please come forward to the mic. Yes, yeah, I'll make it out. And please, do say your name, and is there a sign-up sheet?
Fern Billadu, and I'm Pam Keller's mother.
Okay,
And I'd just like to say that, you know, they own the lot before they moved that trailer on there when they were given permission to do so. Then the 5 years come and went, nobody said nothing about anything, but we know who started the ball rolling again. That's no big secret. So it just doesn't make sense to move that trailer anywhere else when they own the property it's on.
sure.
I have to say.
Can you please write down your name and your address? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's on that side.
Over here, ma'am. My apologies. Yeah, it's over there. Sorry to run you around here. Just so we can get the minutes correct. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak either in favor or in opposition of this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and I'll turn it over to the commissioners for a motion, please. Yes.
Mr. Chair, point of clarification, unless I'm missing it, staff recommends approval, but I don't see any recommendations and conditions. I will be adding one if I make the motion, but
Sure.
you did mention recommendations, and I don't see any, so, other than the verbal one that Lance just made right now.
I think that it should be on a permanent foundation if it's going to stay there. And it may be, I don't know, but somebody needs to confer or comply or check that to make sure it's in compliance.
Understand, just clarifying for what's on our agenda.
Thank you. Yep. Commissioners, I'll have a motion, please.
I'll make a motion. Move to approve the rezone to MH variance for the rear yard setback with the condition of a permanent foundation be placed under the manufactured home.
Got a motion on the floor, commissioners?
Second.
Got a second as well. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the roll, please.
Karpenko,
Yes.
Keller,
Yes.
Neither,
Yes.
Wagoness,
Yes.
Wetzler,
Yes.
Barch,
Yes.
Burning,
Yes.
Bollinger, Demakis,
Yep.
Hanson.
Yes.
Motion to approve has carried. On to agenda item number 2. This is an application by Colby 2018 LLC, represented by Tyler Oliver, to subdivide Minot Park Partners Edition, west 400 feet of Lot 1, less Evanston Edition, plus south 40 of west 100 of Lot 2, less Highway, into 2 lots to be known as Minot Partners Second Edition, lots 1 and 2. This property is located at 717 27th Street Southeast. Mr. Lang, comments, please?
Yes, sir. So we have here a subdivision that's proposed. The vicinity map will show you it's on East Burdick at 27th Street Southeast, kind of at the corner of the fairgrounds there. And the overall parcel that's owned by the current owner is larger than what's being subdivided. So you see the blue line is the overall ownership, and then the red line is approximately 200 by 200 foot site that's being split off for a commercial development. This is a little bit closer view. It had been used as a campground. Actually, they had a special use permit to have campers there, and so that SU will go away. But it is currently zoned C2, as you can see here on the current zoning map. What they're proposing to do is a commercial use. There's commercial around it, and actually even some industrial further to the north and to the east there. There is utilities are in place, water and sewer. You can see blue and red lines out in front, and on the west side. There are adequate access points off of the Both roads showed with, well, the one road with the frontage road off Burdick and the other being kind of a shared access point through the parking lot to up to the north there. And stormwater, of course, will have to be handled to the engineering department's satisfaction. This is actually kind of at the end or bottom of a drainage area, so I don't think that there's going to be detention required. They want to keep the water moving. That'll be an engineering issue. This is a subdivision plat. The only thing that's a little bit weird about it is there's an existing billboard sign kind of in the bottom left corner there. You can see that box out and little flag lot or stem, kind of a pipe stem. And the reason that's being done is because the owners of record today that have the remainder of the property want to keep the billboard sign with their property. So that skinny arm connects the billboard sign to theirs, and then the other land is for the new developer. So findings of fact, going to do a subdivision. It's already zoned commercial. Everything's there. Recommendations are to approve the plat, subject to erosion and sediment control practices to meet the state and local engineering requirements. There'll be a developer's agreement for this that addresses all the engineering requirements. Sidewalks will be required. The owners sent an email and requested that this be reconsidered. So I think this would be up to the engineering department. We probably don't need sidewalks here at this time. I don't know that they would do any good or connect anything. So it would be up to the engineering department to waive those, but that's certainly, I would think, a possibility. The only thing would be in the future if there was some kind of walkability program with the fairgrounds or whatever, and they wanted to put in sidewalks, then perhaps that would be an issue. But for now, I'll leave that to engineering on the sidewalk issue. And then the last is that public utility fees will be required. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Lang? Seeing none, I'll open up the public hearing and I'll ask for the applicant to speak on behalf of this agenda item.
Good evening. Tyler Oliver is my name, and I'm from Kansas City. Happy to answer any questions that you may have. Sole purpose for the lot split is to build a Dollar General.
What was that, a dollar?
Dollar General?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know if they wanted the name out or not. So.
Okay. No, that's all good. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Hang tight in case any questions come up. Thanks, Tyler. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak either in favor or in opposition of this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and I'll turn it over to the commissioners for a motion, please.
I'll move to approve based on staff recommendation and conditions.
Got a motion on the floor to approve
Second?
and a second. Any discussion, commissioners?
Question for discussion. You mentioned, Mr. Lang, about sidewalks, leaving that to engineering. Right now, it states will be required. Do we need to make an adjustment to that?
Mr. Meyer, do we need to require sidewalks, or is that something that can be waived unless they're ordered in by council, or how does that work?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Karpenko, on rural section roadways such as Burdick Expressway right now, typically what we'll do is when we write up the conditions, we'll say that sidewalks are required once the roadway is brought up to urban road standards. Otherwise, right now, the sidewalk would be in the bottom of the ditch and it wouldn't work.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Got a motion to approve and a second on the floor. Commissioners, any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Demakis,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Karpenko,
Yes.
Keller,
Abstain.
Neither,
Yes.
Wagonist,
Yes.
Wetzler,
Yes.
Barch,
Yes.
Burning,
Yes.
Bollinger.
Motion to approve is carried. On to agenda item number 3. This is a continuation of an application by Mark Gagne to change the zone from R1 Single Family Residential District to C2 on Outlot 14, Section 21, 15583. The property is located on the north side of 11th Avenue Southwest, approximately a quarter mile west of Highway 83 bypass frontage road, and 1,000 feet north of Highway 2 and 52. Mr. Lang, we'll turn it over to the city for comments, please.
Yes, sir. You'll recall last month this rezoning request was before you when you see the slides and everything, the memories will come back, I'm sure. Really, the staff's position on this has been consistent from the time that the applicant had called and talked about possibilities of what to do with this property, and was advised that commercial was going to be an uphill battle, in my opinion, and that I didn't think staff would support it, and we haven't. And he purchased the property anyway and decided to try and pursue the rezoning, which is his right. But at DRT was also advised that staff would not support this. So nothing's really changed from the staff standpoint from last month. We have reasons we think are valid why it's not in the best interest of the public, the community, to rezone this property to a commercial zone. If you remember, it's out on the west side of town by the bypass. It's in an area that's kind of surrounded by a loop of the Souris, and it's in the floodplain and will likely, very likely, be in the floodway, which is even more restricted when the new FEMA regulations come out. Just a couple of observations. It's about a quarter mile or so from the frontage road along 52 West Bypass that would need to be improved. Right now, just the part that goes to Mr. Larson's, about the first 400 feet has been improved. And if this was zoned commercial, one would expect it would carry commercial traffic up and down that road. It is a center line or a section line location, which means that it would be set up for a road, but that doesn't mean that the commission and council need to approve a commercial use on that section line if it doesn't make sense. That would bring that kind of traffic into the area. And it also shows that it's about 380 feet to the closest commercial property, which would be the truck stop there. This is the zoning. In the blue outline, you may recall that one of the neighboring owners has the C2 lot that's shown here that's being rezoned back to residential. And I think at the council meeting next week, that'll be finalized and it will be RA and no longer C2. So then you can see where the 380 feet now stretches all the way from the site all the way over across to where that red used to be. And so it's isolated, from commercial development. There's the floodplain map existing, 100-year floodplain. There's the proposed with the floodway. There's a land use map and zoning. So the two questions really that come to mind are, and the same as last month. First of all, is it appropriate to zone this to commercial, from residential to commercial? And when we ask that question, it's not particularly for any given use. It could be for any use, because once it's zoned C2, then anything allowed in C2 could conceivably be done there. So that's the first question. Is it appropriate, given some of the reasons that I've stated with the floodplain and isolated area, and there's no commercial around it, and to rezone it that way? But the second question is the proposed use that the owner has established and doing at other places is these roll-off boxes that they're not full of trash, they're empty, but they're stored so they can be delivered to different sites around town, to commercial development projects and whatnot. And in staff's opinion, it's really an industrial use to store those types of units that are, they're industrial equipment to be used on construction sites. It's not like a commercial zoning where we would have retail type things for sale. So the fact that it's, in our opinion, industrial makes it even bigger jump, I think, to rezone it to industrial. And if the applicant were successful in rezoning to C2, and in fact, staff says it's industrial, then it doesn't do him any good if he can't do the industrial thing he wants to do on the property got zoned C2. So there's a lot of issues with this. We went through them last month, and staff's position is still the same. We feel that the findings of fact here, same as last time. And then we feel that this should be denied because of the floodplain, proximity or no proximity to other commercial, the future land use map, other parcels are all zoned ag and other things, and then the road issues. So with that, don't want to belabor what we've already talked about a bunch last month, and I will take any questions that you might have.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Lang? Seeing none, I'll open the public hearing, and I'll ask, is the applicant in the audience would like to speak on behalf of this application?
Mr. Chairman, Board, due to a change in circumstances and other options coming available, I'd like to revise my rezoning request at this time. I'm no longer seeking a change to C2, but rather a change from R1 to RA, with the intended use no longer business-related, but the intended use would now be pasture property use. I may seek a building permit for a small barn in the future, but as of today, those plans have not been finalized.
Okay.
That's all I have, Fran.
So at this time, you're changing your application.
Would like to, if that's possible, to
Okay.
change it.
I'm gonna have to reach out to the city attorney. Would notifications of change of application have to go out to surrounding property owners?
Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, yeah, we would have to re-notify all the neighboring property owners, and the publication would have to be amended. So this would have to go back to the planning department, your application amendment.
Okay. I apologize that I came in at the last minute. This is something just kind of changed very recently for me.
That's
so.
that's okay, Mr. Gagne.
The deadline is the 15th of April to be on the May meeting, and then it will go on to council in June, and in July. It'll be a while. It'll be like 90 days before it's approved, but I think staff would certainly support rezoning it to RA, which is what we just did with the parcel adjacent to it.
Yeah.
It's a better option in my opinion, so.
So, Mr. Lang, do you have to meet with the applicant to revise his application?
Certainly, you can come in anytime, Mark, and we can fill out an application before the 15th.
Okay.
And
Yep.
get that on the docket.
Not a problem.
Okay.
All right.
So we will, I don't know, I still feel we should act on this item, either hold, pull the item, potentially, a couple options. Commissioners,
Can he pull it?
the applicant can pull it himself, yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Kennedy, would you like to pull your item?
If I pull it, then do the resubmitting the fees all start over again too, or does that not really make a difference?
Well, that'd be the question, I guess, in terms of strategy here. If it could be somehow kept in the loop as a rezoning request, but change the direction of it, that would be advantageous, I would think, because otherwise, if it's pulled and reapplied, I would think that all new fees would be due. So, city attorney, is there a way that he can request amending the zoning, and it can be, I guess it would be tabled.
Can we table it?
Mr. Chair, I think you can, or the planning commission can either hold the item or send the item back to the planning department for further review and information.
There we go.
Motion to hold.
Motion to hold by Mr. Wegnest,
Second.
and a second. Any discussion, commissioners? Call the roll, please.
Wegnest,
Yes.
Wetzler,
Yes.
Barch,
Yes.
Burning,
Yes.
Bollinger, Demakis,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Karpenko,
Yes.
Keller,
Yes.
neither.
Yes, motion to hold is carried. On to agenda item number 4. This is an application by Power of the Purse, Inc., represented by Kristen Bowen for a conditional use permit to allow transitional living facility for up to 16 people plus staff on Summit Park Edition, Lot 13, and south 10 feet of Lot 14, Block 6. This property is located at 24 14th Avenue Southwest. Turn it over to city staff for comments, please.
Yes, sir. City staff has been working with this group for several months now, and you're probably aware the mayor has a council on addiction, and there's a need for certain groups, the populations in the community that are dealing with certain issues. And when we first started working with this group, it was a different location, and this is a second location, but this is a conditional use permit application for a transitional living facility for 16, maximum of 16 persons. The vicinity map here, you see it is on 14th Avenue Southwest. Right to the west of it is Tractor Supply Company, and right to the east of it is a law firm, and then the rest we'll see here in a minute with the zoning is primarily residential uses. This is a close-up of it a little closer. You can see it's not a huge lot. There's not very much backyard space or anything for the outside of the lot, but it is zoned R1. You'll see in the neighborhood there is a mixture of uses. R1 extends off to the east and to the north and some to the south, but to the south there's also some higher density residential, and of course over to the west along Broadway frontage there is commercial zoning. So it is in those ways a transitional neighborhood, which I think is probably more a better situation than the original site they had looked at was kind of in the middle of a R1 district, and there wasn't any other type of uses really very close. So this is a better situation, I think, to have the transitional type of situation that they're in. At the time we first started working with the group, they had targeted a group of basically women that had addiction problems with drug or alcohol abuse, so it was a sober house for women. And since that time, working with representatives from the Power of the Purse, they'd like to take a broader approach, and instead of specifying a specific use group or support group or a specific need, that this be a transitional facility that would be available in working with their, with their management and their oversight to help that happen. Not necessarily identified whether it be drugs or alcohol or autism or retardation or whatever the case might be. And the 16 persons really came about from the original application. They had wanted 15 people, and according to fire codes, we could go up to 16 people in the occupancy class. So 15, 16, pretty close. 16 is what we decided based on the occupancy that would be allowed here, which is quite a few people in a house in a lot this size. This is the front of the house. One of the things required in a conditional use permit application is elevations of all four sides. And since this is an existing structure, it's pretty easy to go take photographs of that. So those have been provided here. This is the backyard, and again, you see there's very little backyard on the rear. Or I should say this is the rear elevation. Very little backyard there. This is a floor plan, and it doesn't really show much other than dimensions. There is a main floor and a basement and a two-car garage. And I think if the CUP moves forward, someone should provide some more information on the floor plan about how they propose to split this up into bedrooms and whatnot. And working with the building department, there'll be building permits required, I would think. That it wouldn't be totally set up the way they want it. They'd probably want to do some changes. So there's a view from the other end, from the west, from the commercial side. And then from the east, you'll see here there's a concrete parking pad off the alley next to the driveway. And at one point when I was writing the comments, I thought, well, 3 cars could fit on this concrete pad. And then there'd be 2 in the garage, there'd be 2 behind the garage, so that'd be 7 total. But then someone pointed out to me, if you look at the alley right of way, everything's shown in red shading as the alley or street right of way. So really, you could get the 2 cars in the garage, the 2 on the apron, and 1 next to it, but then the next car in red would really not be off-street parking. So really, there's only 5 spaces that would be considered off-street parking, and the on-street parking isn't reservable, isn't designated for any particular house. So even though people can park up and down the street on-street housing, what we look at is off-street parking when we look at facilities. And the law firm next door, Humphrey Law Firm, the owner was talking to me about the fact that they had to provide 10 spaces. And when I look at this, it seems to me like they're in the same situation. I don't know if they claim the 2 on the west end, but they're in the same situation with their parking lot where they have cars stacked behind other cars in order to get in and out, and then the one row is not even off of the right of way. So I wouldn't say that there are actually 10 spaces there, but there is parking there for that use as well. And parking is an issue in the neighborhood, I think, because it is a residential neighborhood, and of course we don't want to have too many cars. So findings of fact, They need a CUP. I think they presented the information for the CUP, although without knowing exactly what type of group home is known or that it's unknown, makes it a little bit difficult to write conditions. And they've been very open about, well, we're open to whatever conditions that you'd like to prepare. So taking a shot at it here, these are staff conditions that are recommended. They can certainly be amended if you don't agree with them, commissioners, or they could be added, more could be added, or they could be removed. But the first one is the total maximum number of occupants shall not exceed 16 persons. That would include any staff or anybody that would be there. Number two, no more than 5 vehicles would count for off-street parking, and all of those would have to be licensed and operable. Number three, the elevations that they submitted, the pictures are fine, but the floor plan, I think, needs to be a little more work. It doesn't necessarily have to be a licensed architect or anything, but if there's someone in the group that's artistic, they can draw up what they'd like to do with the rooms and meet with the building department. That would be good. Fire sprinklers are one of the big issues. After a lot of discussion and review, staff has determined they're not required as long as the International Fire Code R3 occupancy type applies, which is what we're looking at with the sober house. If there's a change in use to a higher occupancy that might require more hands-on care, daily care, or medical care, or something like that, then there may be that increase in occupancy would require sprinklers. And of course, the council has the right to require sprinklers if they think that they should, because there's 16 people in a single house. The fire department and council can be stricter than what the state would require. But at this point, staff's recommendation is that sprinklers would not be required as long as it's IFC R3 occupancy. And then a code review anytime that the use changes. If there is not a fire suppression system, then there are some 1-hour rated walls that are required around the sleeping rooms, separating them horizontally and vertically, and corridors and whatnot. That would be something to work with the building department. And again, number 6, also with the building department, any changes to the structure, egress, room dimensions, ceiling heights, all that has to be coordinated with floor plans and construction documents, and requires appropriate building or remodel permits. Smoke detectors are required in and outside the bedrooms. Carbon monoxide required. Detections required. Egress windows for any basement sleeping room with a 48-inch escape clearance. So if they're going to frame up new rooms, that they need to have access to the outside, they need to have egress windows. And then ADA compliance may be required, not knowing exactly how much the floor plan would be modified or what the scope of construction is. That would again be something that the building department could analyze. And finally, in the definition of a group home, it states that it's supposed to be a licensed facility. And after a lot of time on the phone with the state, I came to determine that even though the Department of Health licenses developmentally disabled populations or group homes, they do not license like the sober house that was originally proposed. So the licensing, I guess, really would just come in play with this conditional use permit to operate the facility under the terms of the permit. The applicant's responsible, the permit's not transferable, which will expire if the home ceases, or if there's a change in occupancy, then the CUP may need to be amended or a new one issued. And if there's issues with the neighborhood being disrupted to the neighborhood or something like that, that are sufficient that the council feels that it would be necessary to revoke the permit, they have the right to do that. So other conditions, as we sent emails back and forth, and again, the applicants were real open to, add whatever you want, because this is going to be real low key. They said, you can put in here no sex offenders, you can put in here no persons with violent criminal history, you can put in here no people requiring personal care or infants or whatever. I didn't add those in there yet. I didn't know, we can add a lot of stuff, but to me, it's just a harder exercise not knowing exactly which type of group home it's going to be to write the conditions that would be applicable. But I guess that's up to the commission. We certainly have, I think, 11 that apply, and then here's a few more. And then there are any more that you might think of that would be apropos would be up to you. So if you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer them.
Mr. Lang, can we go back through the conditions, please, and start with number 1? I just want to match them up with the ones that we were provided, just so we can see what was added or dismissed. Let's see, 16, number 2. So number 2 was modified to go from 7 to 5.
Right.
Number 3, a floor plan, okay. And then number 4, did we add?
Fire sprinklers are not required.
So the fire sprinklers are not required at this time.
Right.
Okay.
And if there's a change in use, they could be, or if council decides they'd like to have them, they can certainly order them in.
And then 5 would go to the fire code requiring, okay, so number 4 was added, that they're not required, okay. And then it was just to last the other conditions, correct? Were the only changes from what we have?
Yeah, what happened was I went back and changed all this stuff, and I forgot to close my computer when I came here, so I had it all done correctly.
Yep. No problem, no problem.
But yeah, as you look through here, these are the ones that would be maximum occupants, vehicles, the floor plan, the fire sprinklers, code review and permits, and smoke detectors and carbon monoxide egress windows, ADA compliance, and then the permit itself is, I think, the only permit we can require, because the state doesn't require one.
Okay.
And whatever conditions that the commissioners might want to add.
So again, commissioners, that's number 2, going from 7 to 5. Number 4 was modified to include that fire suppression would be required if the international code requires. And then number 11, any other conditions that we see fit. Any other questions for city staff?
I have one question.
Please.
I'm a little bit confused with the number of people that will be in the building, whether it requires sprinklers or not. You said that the intent is to have up to 16 people, including working people there, people that would be working there. So then if you go down to number, get back here, hang on a second here. The part on sprinklers.
Number 4, I believe.
There was a however comment there about 6 to 16. However, if the change in use to a group home, more than 6 occupants but less than 16.
Yeah, that's the fire code.
Okay, so.
But then it says they're exempt, right? After that, it says R1, the occupancies are exempt from sprinklers. So.
All right, and then didn't you say it becomes an R4 occupancy? Do we still have R4?
It's not the same as zoning.
That's the
Okay,
fire
it's
code.
occupancy.
Fire occupancy,
Okay,
not-
gotcha, okay.
Yeah, I guess a little confusing because there's a lot of R numbers flying around when you look
Yeah,
at zoning
and
and
a lot
fire
of-
code.
Yeah, a lot of numbers too.
That's an understatement.
Any other questions for city staff? I think we'll open the public hearing, and I'll ask, as the applicant in the audience, I would like to speak on behalf of this application.
You want me to sign in
Please
first?
do, yes, yeah.
Okay. My name is Kristen Bowen. I am here representing Power of the Purse, Inc. I'll give you a little bit of background here. Power of the Purse, Inc. is a North Dakota nonprofit corporation organized in December of 2017. We are affiliated with Power of the Purse, a giving circle under the Minot Area Community Foundation. We're comprised of about 40 women in the Minot area. The mission of Power of the Purse is to focus efforts towards particular programs that benefit women and children in the Minot community. Power of the Purse is committed to projects that have the support of the Minot Area Community Foundation. As for this particular project, the Minot Area Community Foundation is supportive. However, it's not within their guidelines of the foundation to own property. So that is the reason Power of the Purse, Inc. was formed. It's a separate and legal nonprofit corporation, and just formed for the purpose of carrying out this project. The current project that we're talking about, Power of the Purse, Inc. is undertaking at this time is to provide a community-based group home setting for residential and transitional housing that provides room, board, and services to individuals with disabilities or difficulties in a family environment. The mission of this particular program is to help address a significant defined need in our community and to provide such a program without requiring it to be funded by the City of Minot or at any public cost. The mission here is to provide this community-based residential housing to benefit a group of 16 individuals. Lance went over the description of the house in detail and the location. I don't know that I need to bore you all with that again, but currently the house is a 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath house. We have plans to add one wall, door and closet to create a 5th bedroom. The egress window is already there. So in the end here, it'll be a 5-bedroom, 2.5-bath house, 2-car garage. I did hand out a map, and I think Lance kind of had the same thing on his presentation, but just showing the house was chosen for a few particular reasons, and one of them is the mix of the neighborhood with multifamily in the area, commercial, walking distance to Broadway. So the surrounding uses here represent a transitional neighborhood, and this community-based group housing is in a location that's compatible with a transitional neighborhood. As will be mentioned when we get to the rules and regulations of the home, all the individuals living in the home are required to be employed or attend school. So this transitional neighborhood with its Broadway commercial corridor nearby provides a great opportunity for employment within walking distance. As far as the individuals that will reside in the home, Power of the Purse, Inc. has total control over the rules and regulations that individuals shall follow in order to be allowed to live in the home. We will not be accepting any individual that is in need of hands-on personal care or any children under the age of 18. And these can be added, as Lance mentioned, to the conditional use restrictions. Parking, if the 5 parking spots on site needs to be added to the conditional use restrictions, that's fine with us. The majority of the residents, the group that we hope to have in there, are not going to have vehicles. So again, just to reiterate, no individuals with a violent criminal history, no sex offenders. And just a little bit on the broad language in the application here. Power of the Purse has been negotiating with a local group to lease the home, but without a permit, we're not able to commit to a lease. For the privacy of the future female disabled residents, it's crucial that they and the location remain anonymous from public record. The group that we would like to see occupy this home has had some additional rules and regulations as to the operation of the home, including a zero tolerance policy consisting of 5 pages of strict rules that residents must sign off on prior to moving in. Some of these rules include any individual that does not specifically comply with the proposed program guidelines is immediately removed from the home. absolutely no use of any type of alcohol or any mind-altering drugs of any type, any doctor-prescribed medications, and all over-the-counter drugs must be approved by the staff. All individuals must submit to urine drug screens, breath tests, and any other tests at the total discretion of the staff upon request. Individuals living at the home are required to be employed or attend school from between 20 to 40 hours a week. There are curfews. I can go Sunday through Thursday is 11. Friday, Saturday, midnight. Quiet time begins every night of the week at 10 p.m. All individuals residing in the home have specific duties with respect to cleaning and maintaining, including exterior of the home and the grounds. No weapons are allowed on the property. So in summary here, Power of the Purse is helping to get this significantly needed program to help a group of disabled area residents started in Minot. Power of the Purse, Inc. is providing a program which will require no funding by the city or by the public. The program is to provide a community-based group home setting for residential housing that provides room board services in a family environment as defined by the ordinances. As mentioned by city staff, the home meets requirements for a conditional use permit. The home is strategically located in a particular transitional neighborhood, as we've discussed, and they will have zero tolerance rules and regulations in place to ensure that we remain a good neighbor at all times. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Any questioners, commissioners for the applicant? Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah.
Burning.
Yes, okay. You anticipate at the maximum approximately 16 people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now you also relate a number of austere conditions that are going to have to be enforced.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have more people in there.
No.
More than 16, will there not?
Nope. 16 includes staff.
That includes staff.
Yes. There's typically in the group that we're hoping to secure for this location, there are typically there is a manager, and then they are always training assistant managers in, and those people have these folks all pay. They pay to stay here. So in exchange, the manager and the assistant managers have reduced rent. But they are included in that 16 number.
Okay,
maximum.
You state that you will cater to people with disabilities or difficulties, which really encompasses a large number of people.
Mm-hmm.
And how many of this staff that you refer to will live there 24 hours a day?
The manager, and then however many assistant managers they have. Which is up to the manager.
How many patients do you anticipate that you would have there? How much staff do you need? 16.
This model is
divided in what manner?
The model is used in other areas of the state.
Where?
Bismarck. Bismarck has 3 successful homes. And their concept is what we're hoping to bring here. So, I mean, if we are allowed 16 folks, then, you know, the numbers fluctuate, right? Because the typical stay would be 9 months. So.
One last question, and then I'll leave. But 16 people, how many of these people will drive? I mean, we're talking about 5 cars.
If the group that we're hoping to get in there is in there, the majority of the residents in Bismarck do not have vehicles. At the point that they go into these type of homes, they don't have cars.
So we should look to Bismarck for guidance on this.
I guess I know that the city staff here has been consulting with Bismarck.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I have one quickly. I'm curious, you're proposing 5 bedrooms, okay? And a manager and assistant manager are gonna live there, so 3 residents, or where are all these people staying, I guess is my concern here. I like your plan. I think this idea is fantastic. My concern is, how are you gonna get 16 people sleeping in a 5-bedroom home?
It is a part of the model that there are a lot of people there's a lot of close quarters. They don't want anyone to be alone. They don't want anybody, maybe hiding something, going off on their own. So that is the purpose for the large number of people.
I have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
What is the training or certification that the staff will be guided by?
The group that we're talking with, the gal is currently a manager in Bismarck.
Okay. Are there certifications for that or specific trainings?
There are guidelines that are followed, yes.
Can you turn on your mic, please? Is it on?
It is.
Okay.
I just talk quietly.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Chairman Either, Chuck Barney, do I need to sign in? I will when I'm done. I've been working on this also with the power of the purse for a number of months. It's ironic that tonight you're meeting on this issue because just next door in the finance meeting room, we were also holding a meeting, and it was the Mayor's Committee on Addiction. And as part of our comprehensive plan, which we're getting ready to release in the next few weeks, sober living houses play in a very important part to the recovery of people that are facing this illness. I commend the power of the purse for taking the initiative to bring forward on their own volition this opportunity for our community. I think that regarding Commissioner Burning's question about Bismarck, we have to go where there's experience. We don't have that in Minot right now. And I can tell you that as a mayor of Minot, every mayor in the community, or in the state, is looking for resources and experience and proven projects that can address this issue. So the fact that we're looking at Bismarck, I think, is outstanding. And I think that we're going to be doing more. We were able to secure a grant where we're looking at programs that are outside our state, especially in states like Vermont, where they have a very comprehensive program, and we're looking to steal anything we can to address this issue. So I'm here tonight to tell you that I am in support of this. We need to be novel. We need to be creative. We need to look at all the options that are available for people to recover from addiction. So thank you, and please consider my comments when you take this issue up. Any questions for me?
Any questions for the mayor? You're good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak in favor of this agenda item? Please come forward.
Chairman Neither and Commissioners, my name is Brian Hanklin with the McGee Hanklin Bacchus Law Firm in Minot, and been working with the Power of the Purse organization. I don't want to repeat everything that Kristen said, and certainly Mayor Barney has brought out some very valid points, and I'm probably bringing it back more to the mundane again, but that is that what I think we have to keep in mind here is we have ordinances again, and the ordinances, as the city staff has correctly pointed out, specifically provides for community-based residential group homes as defined by the ordinance, and that's exactly what this is. We fit within that ordinance. And so with that, we also fit within the defined conditional use permits as described within the ordinances and as appropriately pointed out by city staff. So with that in mind, just so we keep clear, I mean, you folks clearly have the legal authority to grant the recommendation to the city council to approve the conditional use permit. I think we have become aware of certain concerns that has been expressed or that have been expressed by certain of the neighbors. I think that has probably been in your packet. I don't know, there's been some calls or maybe a letter from certain of the residents. And part of those concerns, I guess we were certainly willing to try to address anything we can and any of the concerns we can, and I think that's been indicative of the certain things that we've been agreeable to with respect to conditions to set in the permit. But I think a big one has apparently been, and it's been addressed tonight, but what type of individuals is it that would be living at the home? And I guess I get the tendency to want to get into that, and we have got into that here tonight. But with that in mind also, I think we should keep in mind that when you look at the ordinances itself, we clearly fit within the definition of a group home, number one. Number two, with respect to R1 ordinances, a specific permitted use is this group home of no more than 6 persons plus staff. There's no discussion in that specific permitted use when we're talking about 6 individuals, or no discussion at all as to what's the definition of the individual, what's the description of the individual, what type of individual is it that's in the home. It's just automatic. You open up the group home. So then when we turn to the conditional use permit, the only difference there is it's a specific conditional use permit under R1. That's for a group home serving more than the 6 people. Okay, that's simply the language. There's no language in there when we talk about conditional use permits, once again, as to, and there's no discussion as to what individual is it, what's the description of the individuals, what's the definition of the individuals. The only difference between the specific permitted use in R1 and the conditional use permit, the only language is we're going from 6 to more than 6 people. No discussion of the individuals in the actual home. We've had that discussion, and that's fine, but I think we should be conscious of what we should be talking about here on conditional use permit is not type of individuals. All we're talking about is number of individuals that bring us from the specific permit at hand here. There has other communication, I think, has been to you in terms of concerns on, well, one must believe that other offices would be notified, such as the state health department, local police, fire department, and whatnot. That's been one of the concerns. Frankly, I think those departments have been notified as has been presented to you and is actually presented in the city staff report that you have before you. City staff report states that we must comply with all city, county, state, and federal laws. Perfectly fine with us. Other concerns are, I think it was stated in that correspondence to you, we would also believe there would be periodic or annual follow-up. Certainly so. I think that's the case, frankly, with any conditional use permit, any special use permit, any ordinance of any type. There's always follow-up, and we would welcome that. I think there's other concerns were what a conditional use permit may require. Maybe you need security. Can you find qualified workers? Can you find qualified staff? Maybe there's wages and scheduling concerns. Maybe a professional staff would be a huge undertaking. Well, those things to me, and that was discussed a little bit, but to me, those are really, to me, business decisions. I mean, I get your concerns, but what staff to hire, I just personally feel, I guess, is a business decision. It's not something that the Planning Commission necessarily looks at to determine whether you should issue the permit. I mean, if you fit within the ordinance, I think that's the question. I don't think it's the duty of yours to determine what how you're going to hire an appropriate manager. I mean, or you got appropriate staff. Parking has been addressed, and I think the power of the purse is certainly willing to comply with any parking restrictions that has been placed on this particular property. As we see, actually, I think it's the neighboring property that frankly may have a bigger parking problem. Other concerns are, can the power of the purse own property? Can power of the purse apply for conditional use permit? If the facility does not work out, would this be a normal residence? Can a conditional use permit transfer from owner to owner? I think the city staff has done a very good job of addressing each of those items. I think most of them are page 5 and 6 of the report. I think it goes right down the line and addresses all of those appropriately so. And so bottom line is we fit within the ordinances. We are the group home within the ordinance. We fit within the conditional use permit. And for those reasons, we'll be a good neighbor, and we would respectfully request that you approve the conditional use permit. Any
Thank you. Any questions, commissioners? Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak in favor of this agenda item? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience? Oh.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Humphrey, and I'm at the Humphrey Law Office next door, which, by the way, we were told our parking was fine. Anyway, I'm not trying to be difficult or anything like that. I just felt like this needs maybe a little more study. The information that the neighbors were provided didn't exactly tell us a whole lot about what exactly was even going on. So I'm concerned with a little bit of a notice requirement. The open use that was suggested, it was like, well, it could be a sober living home, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. I mean, it just appears to me that it needs a little more detail as to what was given to the neighbors. And of course, not all the neighbors were here tonight, and I'm a little concerned about that. The other thing I'm a little bit concerned about is if the city approves this, what kind of liability do they have if there's some sort of problem down the road? But if it's a conditional use permit, maybe that's not such a huge issue. And I do believe that, you know, the people who spoke on behalf of it this evening gave us a lot of good information, and I really appreciate it. And I think that the goal here is extremely worthy. I think it's definitely something that our community could use, and there's no doubt about that. I used to be a legal aid lawyer, so I'm like the last person to say that there would be a problem with that. But I'm just concerned about the open-endedness of this, and maybe it needs to be tightened up a little bit or investigated just a little further, and maybe there needs to be some more information given to the neighbors. If we could have that, I think that would be really appreciated.
Sure. I think what I'll do is I'll have the applicant come back up and we'll get some of those questions addressed. Yeah. Could the applicant please step forward? Maybe the first, I guess, one of the first items she mentioned on is the identity of the individuals living there. And maybe from a...
And I'll kind of, again, go back to, we really, without having a conditional use permit here, we don't have an agreement with any particular group. There are some reasons why the application has been broad. Let me see, I read it here, if I can find it.
Maybe to protect the identity of
Well,
those
yes, that's kind of what we're concerned about. You know, these are disabled residents, and just for their privacy, really, and it's crucial that the location remain anonymous here. So that's why the application was written the way it was.
Or for that property, maybe, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but to be labeled per se as this type of house or that type of property.
Right, and you know, if something goes wrong and we end up not being able to get the group here in Minot that we want, then, you know, we do need to consider some other options if Power of the Purse owns this house and doesn't have a tenant for it. So, I mean, we are going down the road to get this group out of Bismarck, but, I mean, accidents, things happen, right? We're close, but we're waiting on, we're kind of waiting on this, so.
Sure. And you will carry liability insurance and all that stuff?
Oh, yes.
Per the,
yeah.
Okay.
We'll
Thank
be
you.
well insured.
Thank you. Any other questions either? I'm sorry.
Say one more thing I didn't, about the 16 people. We mentioned in here a few times that there are no city or state funds that go to support this. The way these things support themselves is that the residents do pay rent. So obviously the model doesn't work if you have a $250,000 house and 6 residents in it. So, I mean, there are reasons that the number is what it is. One is for support and their recovery, but the other is also the financial model. And all those residents are not paying at the same time. Some are maybe just coming in and looking for jobs. So you need to kind of have some flexibility in how many residents can be there, and then hope that there are enough that at that time are paying and it can support itself. So.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much. Alderman Wolski.
Chairman, neither commissioners, thank you. I'm standing here tonight as an adjacent property owner, so I'm not standing here as a acting council member. I fully support the mission of the Power of the Purse, and I fully acknowledge the need for this in the community. I would just draw attention to conversations with my neighbors, concerns about the manner in which this was presented, the appropriate and intentional ambiguous nature of the application raises concerns. And the neighbors are concerned about it. And so I don't know if there is and obviously I know the individuals from Power of the Purse are going to be as disclosing as they can be and seeking to put everybody at ease that this is going to be run professionally and effectively. But maybe as a way to maybe alleviate some of those concerns, if you choose to approve this tonight and advance it to council, it would be appropriate to set a meeting between the Power of the Purse and other individuals in the neighborhood to perhaps have any concerns addressed prior to Monday evening. So with that, I just wanted to share my thoughts. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Would that be
I can
acceptable?
maybe address that a little bit. If what they have done in Bismarck is the manager and in Bismarck, the owner of these homes, has gone around to all the neighbors and let them know what's going on, what the expectations are, and gives her own personal cell phone number. So if there are any issues with what is going on in the house or any questions, that they have direct contact with the manager. So we would expect something like that, and we're told something like that would happen here in Minot if we move forward. So,
thank you. Would anybody else like to speak either in favor or in opposition of this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and I'll turn it over to the commissioners for a motion, please.
I can make a motion. With all conditions 1 through 11, I'd like to add some, so get ready to write. In addition, I'm going to play off of what Mrs. Bowen spoke about. I'd like to add no sex offenders, no persons with violent criminal history, no persons requiring personal care, no persons under the age of 18, no weapons on property, no unprescribed or illegal drugs or alcohol.
Got a motion on the floor. We do have a second. From Karpenko. Item number 4, the vehicles from 7 to 5.
What we were presented here is
This presentation.
Right, not what we have
Not what
on-
we have in our report. Thank you very much. Got a motion on the floor and a second. Any discussion, commissioners?
Could that motion be read again?
Sure.
Please.
The motion is to approve with all conditions 1 through 11 as seen, as presented by Mr. Lang today, and an additional condition. Go ahead.
The additional conditions that there's no sex offenders allowed, no one with a criminal history, no one with a violent criminal history, no one that requires personal care, no one under the age of 18, no weapons on the property, and no unprescribed or illegal drugs and alcohol on the property.
Got a motion on the floor, and we have a second as well. Any discussion, commissioners?
Thank you.
Call the roll, please.
Karpenko.
Yes.
Keller.
Yes.
Neither.
Yes.
Wagonist.
Yes.
Wetzler.
Yes.
Barch.
Yes.
Burning.
No.
Bollinger. Demakis.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Motion to approve is carried. On to agenda item number 5. Please bear with me. My apologies. Agenda item number 5, a reconsideration of an application by Southwest Crossing Partners, Jerome Kukley, for a variance to the paving requirement to allow approximately 350 linear feet of asphalt milling as an interim parking lot surfacing until permanent paving can be installed on Southwest Crossing Addition, Block 1, Lot 2. The property is located on the east side of the garages for 3819, 3823 Crossing Street Southwest. We'll turn it over to city staff for comments, please.
Yes, sir. You'll recall this one from last month as well. This site is located west on 37th Avenue, which is the road that goes by Walmart down south. The Southwest Crossing Apartments, and if you recall, we went through this variance discussion, and the motion was to deny the variance. But when it went to council, even though variances are approved by Planning Commission, the council, can look at any of the city business, and they caught wind of an option that we talked a little bit about last month, which would be escrow account or cash bond, some way to ensure that money was available so that the work can be completed if there's any defaults on, any further defaults on not getting this done, that might be a way to proceed. So they asked to actually remand this variance request back to the Planning Commission to reconsider that option. To me, it's almost not a variance anymore because it's more of a, it's more of a financial agreement kind of situation. But I suppose the situation is now, as we said last month, the paving's in for 4 of the 5 buildings. It has been since 2015, but the last building, they'd like to get a certificate of occupancy to generate cash flow, but the paving isn't done to the satisfaction of the city. We saw the calculations, and we saw some pictures last month, you recall, of the asphalt buildings and the fact that there weren't curb and gutters or sidewalks or landscaping or any of those kind of things installed to satisfaction, unprotected inlets. So the situation is still the same in regards to if it was just a straight variance request, can we live with what's there until later? No, I think our position would still be that that's not acceptable to staff. It doesn't meet the requirements of hardship. But in the case where we were able to get the plans that were originally approved by the city back when this was supposed to be done, and have bids prepared so that the city could establish the bid value, and that 120% of that value be available in a cash bond or whatever financial vehicle the city would require, and then a date would be mutually agreed upon with the the owner that all this work has to be done by a certain date in 2018, this coming construction season, and all the work would include not only just paving the surface for the cars, but also the curb and gutter, the paving itself, landscaping, striping, any drainage inlets, sidewalks, all of those things would need to be constructed to city specs by that specified completion date. And if that all were to be handled in that manner and it was acceptable to the engineering department, then the city could issue the remaining C of O for the last building, allowing the existing asphalt that's there now to work until the crews can get in there and do it right. And we're coming down to the line now as everything's starting to thaw out. So it's going to be April pretty soon. So it's almost getting to be a point where it's almost getting too late. But I suppose if this is something that's agreeable to the owner and to the city, if it's an avenue that you think would be a solution to get this taken care of, the council wanted it to be considered that way. And I don't know, Lance, do you have anything to add in terms of how this would be packaged, or, what you would require from the owner, and what the dates might be? That are we talking as soon as we can get this done, or by the end of the season, or what are your thoughts representing the engineering aspects?
I'm glad you came up, because I was going to ask the same thing. If you want to let us leave it in your court to establish a date, or how would you like to proceed?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, like I had mentioned last month, this sort of arrangement would be highly unusual. We haven't done something like this on this sort of application. So City Council wanted us to consider it. It's back in front of you folks. If we go down this sort of path, we would require a bond, a performance bond essentially be in place, so that if the work wasn't done by a date that's set, then the city would have to pursue that bond and then hire a contractor to have that work performed. So there's some risk there that's then placed on the city to make sure that work is completed. It'd be no different than any other city project. Then at that point it'd be under our control, and we'd be responsible for paying the contractor, et cetera. I'd like to have it done as soon as possible. I don't like these projects dragging on very long or having a lot of ambiguity out there. I think the applicant is looking for as late as possible. We'd want something as early as possible, and thus we'd probably try to meet in the middle of something like July 15th or something like that.
Okay. Any questions for city engineer?
I have a question of Lance, if I can. Lance, if a date is set up, and of course the property owner would prefer a later date than an earlier date, but then the city has to consider that if it doesn't get done, then the city would be responsible somewhat to have it done. The later on you get in the construction season, the higher the prices go. So I mean, there's some indication there that it has to be done early, at an early date. Would you agree or disagree?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Wetzler, yeah, there is some risk to that, and generally that's why we would agree on a bid price, something that if we would walk into any one of the construction companies here in Minot and say, well, here's what the bond's for, can you do it for this? We want to make sure that our prices are covered plus some contingency. That's why we usually use 120%.
Any other questions, commissioners? Thanks.
You're welcome.
Would the applicant like to speak on behalf of this agenda item?
I guess I'd like to, a little bit anyway. I don't want to reiterate everything unless you remember what it was all about last time or whatever. Everybody got a pretty clear mind about it?
Then like comes a city headache.
But I guess to start with, and maybe it'll get too late. There's no doubt about it. But we'll have that opportunity to pull it if we need to. It's all going to depend on when the funds can come in, and we have to sell things in order to do it because you can't borrow money. It just doesn't work. You can't borrow money out here in the oil patch. So, and they all think it's oil patch. This is actually hospital related. but they don't care. They will not do anything out in North Dakota. So I have to sell some stuff in order to make that work. If I could sell something tomorrow, we'd forget about the bond, and stuff, because it's an extra cost for me as far as that goes. But I'd like to have the opportunity to make that choice, that we could use it or get a variance to use what we have put in place. It did cost us some money to do that. We sold a lot in Tioga, and that's where the funds came from that. There must have been a misunderstanding on it when we originally did that work. My partner called Jackie at the city and asked if we could put the parking lot in blacktop. And she said, yeah, as long as it's hard surfaced. But she wasn't thinking we were going to put in the concrete curb and gutter, the sidewalk, and everything else as well. So it wasn't a mistake on her part at all. It was on our part. But and I asked him how many parking stalls he needed. He said 7. So I said, well, we'll run it as far as that first catch basin to make sure we have some drainage. We ran it beyond the first catch basin. We were 12 parking stalls short in the end. So back to the drawing board. It happened to be the last day that Bechtel paving was open when they did that. So we had no other recourse but to try to put in the millings after that, because you couldn't do it anymore. So that was part of the hardship, and it isn't necessarily all been financial. It's been a terrible deal financially, if you want to know. But I sure wish you guys would reconsider and move forward with this and let Lance and I work it out. And I know Lance well enough, and we've worked together in Minnesota and when he was there, and I don't think he's got any problems with me other than it's precedent setting for the city, and that's part of his problem, So.
Any questions?
Do you have any questions at all?
Seeing none, hang tight for a minute. Something might come up, but
okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to speak either in favor or in opposition of this agenda item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and I'll turn it over to the commissioners for a motion, please.
Make a motion to deny the applicant's request.
Got a motion to deny on the floor.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion, commissioners?
I made the motion, so my basis is we haven't done this before, and I'm not sure it's something we want to get into.
Sure.
Bonding these types of things, I think it puts a pretty big liability on the city and the taxpayers of the city. So.
Sure.
Purpose of my motion.
I like to see we have nothing now, but we potentially might come up with a bond. Just a different way of looking at it. But thank you very much for your comments. Any other? Any other discussion? Call the roll, please.
Wagnest,
Yes.
Wetzler,
Yes.
Barch,
Yes.
Burning,
Yes.
Bollinger, Demakis,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Karpenko,
Yes.
Keller,
Yes.
neither.
Yes. Motion carried. Motion to deny has carried. On to agenda item number 6. This is an application, by the City of Minot to change the text amendment to the City of Minot zoning ordinance with respect to the agricultural zone. My iPad died, so I couldn't read the full agenda item. So.
I got you. All righty. So we've been working with some individuals on trying to develop a campground, and the only place that campgrounds are allowed anymore in the code currently are in the ag zone, and ag zone requires 20 acres for any use, which I think makes sense for the most part, but for a campground, probably not. If you think about 20 acres of campground, that's pretty big. It'd be 200 or 300 stalls for campers, right? And do we really want like Swenson's over there or something like that? Is that the only kind of campground we would want? Probably not. So did some research on what some other communities in the state have for this issue, and so what we decided to do is to amend the text in a couple of places. First of all, Chapter 2, there is no definition for campground currently. So this is proposed. Campground means facilities providing camping or parking areas and incidental services for travelers in recreational vehicles, camping cabins, or tents, which accommodate each guest or visitor for no more than 14 consecutive days in any 1 month period. A camping cabin is a temporary living quarters only to be used in campgrounds. So that was our language. We wanted to have a restriction I don't know if you're comfortable with 14 days. I've seen as little as 7 and as many as, more than that, 21 or whatever. 14 seemed to be reasonable. Then moving on to also in the definition section, there was already a definition for a recreational vehicle, but there was also a definition for recreational vehicle campground. No definition for campground, but definition for RV campground. And to provide some distinction, I guess, between pitching a tent and having an RV campground, I tried to add some language in here. So it says a plat of ground under single ownership or management, which has been planned and improved for the parking of recreational vehicles and incidentals such as tents, picnic tables, barbecue grills, regardless of whether or not there's a charge made for such accommodations. And again, length of stay no more than 14 consecutive days in any 1 month period. So I was trying to put the emphasis on the RVs, and then there could be, the kids might stay in a tent and there might be other stuff going on, but it's really an RV recreational vehicle focused kind of a use. So that was the definition, proposed definition changes. Then in Chapter 19, Agricultural District, in 19-4, under conditional uses, there are 2 currently in there. One is campground or expansion to existing campgrounds, and one is compassion centers operating as growing, processing, or manufacturing for medical marijuana. So our goal here was to add recreational vehicle campgrounds in as a 3rd conditional use, and then to amend the site area requirements for campgrounds or RV campgrounds, 19A and B, to 90,000 square feet as minimum site area. That's a little bit over 2 acres. And then under 19-6, where we have the lot height, yard, and area requirements, the minimum lot area is 20 acres for all uses in ag zoning, except as set forth in 914A and B, which is back to the 90,000 square feet. And so if this were to move forward and be approved, then the RV campground that they've been trying to get done out by Capital RV could make application to move forward with their rezoning and their conditional use permit and whatnot, and get that done. So if there are any questions about this language, or if you think it needs to be amended, then please let me know.
Commissioners, any questions? Please, Pam.
Thank you. I have a question, Mr. Lang. Are we trying to add language to accommodate a specific application at this time? Because that's the appearance in my opinion. The second thing would be, is 2 acres or 90,000 square feet really enough for a recreational vehicle campground?
Sure. I can maybe speak to that if you don't mind. So on the steering committee, we talked about that, and right now, in our ordinance, the only place that a campground is allowed is an ag. So the minimum acreage you need to have in an agricultural zone is 20 acres. So to your point, I don't think this is specifically for that application by any means, but it's a fix. Mr. Ackerman and myself and a couple other individuals on the steering committee looked at that, and we don't know why we stuck this particularly in ag when we did our overhaul of the ordinance. Now, if you had a 20-acre site zoned ag and the whole thing was a campground, we came up with, what would it fit, 1,000 RVs or something like that?
Two or 300.
Yeah, it was a couple hundred RVs or a couple hundred or even 500 campers at one place. I don't think we want, it just seems like an extraordinary large chunk of ground to have a campground zone for. Unless, to your comment, is this specifically for one application? No, I think it's, we looked at the steering committee level as it's a problem that exists that we need to address in the ordinance, so.
And 2 acres is, how did you come up with 2 acres?
Go ahead, Mr. Lang.
I didn't hear.
How do we come up with 2 acres was the question. I think...
that was looking at Bismarck and Parkville?
Yeah.
A couple of other communities in the state.
We looked at a few different communities and came up with the 90,000 square feet, the 2 acres.
An acre is about 200 feet by 200 feet, so a couple acres is 400 feet by 400 feet, if that puts it in perspective. Bigger than a football field by a football
I know how
field.
big it is. Thank you, Mr. Lang. So how many recreational vehicles are you expecting to fit into a 2-acre site?
Well, it depends on how the site lays out. You know, a lot of the nicer ones have pull-through sites that eat up a lot of ground because so that's easy for people to pull through. So it'd be up to, I think, each individual application when they came in, they'd have to have at least 90,000. Now, if they wanted to have a 10-acre campground or something like that, they could. Just seems like 20,000 is an awful lot when there's no other place anywhere in the code. The code used to allow campgrounds in C2, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea that we took it out of C2 because, you know, that's C2 is all the commercial right along the main drags. And ag seems to make sense as a campground's kind of an outdoorsy thing, right? So these are the recommendations we came up with. I mean, if you think that they're off base, they need to be bigger or smaller or something like that, then we can certainly take that into consideration, go back and do further research, look at some more communities, and try to get a better average. But this seemed to be reasonable when we discussed it amongst the steering committee.
So,
do you have any recommendations as far as what you would like to see?
Don't, because I'm not an expert, but just when I look at, we require we don't, the health district does requires 2 acres for a real property, right, to have a septic system. So in my mind, 2 acres does seem quite small to approve a recreational vehicle campground. Seems like a very small space to me. If you're talking about big drive-through vehicles.
Sure.
I think that's very small.
Yeah, and even in that regard, you know, to the septic, just because it's a campground doesn't mean it's going to have septic, you know, included in that campground. They could have no septic and have it hauled off, of course, but I do see your point. Yeah.
I just think it's small.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
And maybe a comment. I think, and I might be wrong, but I think a lot of where we had C2 campgrounds available, initially, a lot of it was to do with the fairgrounds, overflow RV parking at the fairgrounds on C2 property on the east side of 27th Street. And so that's how some of that stuff became RV parking or campground parking. So, you know, is that going to be eliminated then from C2?
Well, it's not allowed today. The ones that are still there, you know, that Dollar General site that came in tonight had a special use permit as an RV park at one time. I don't know if they're still really using it, but
that was fairground type stuff too.
It's it'd be a non-conforming use at this point. So
right. I mean, we can certainly look at some other examples and see if that should be increased, but the RVs themselves have self-contained, you know, waste facilities that they can dump at a dump station, or there could be hookups. You know, if it was larger and they wanted to lay out water and sewer hookups for each individual one, as well as electric pedestals, you know, they could do that. It would depend, I think, on each camp and what level of facilities they wanted to offer and how big the site was and how they laid it out.
I think the concern here is I don't necessarily think I could support an applicant coming in here with a football field and saying I want 25 RV spots. Give me 2 football fields, give me 4 acres, 180,000 square feet. That, I think, is a parcel of land that I would have more flexibility with. I mean, a 2 acre chunk of property, there's a lot of them around. So what's to say that we don't get requests now in the middle of town to rezone something to a campground and put 25 spots in? You know,
well, that'd be ag.
You know, it just, yeah, football field's a nice chunk of land, but I think maybe that's a little small. And I think that's the concern Pam is trying to voice here. Maybe we just kind of got crisscrossed as maybe our minimum site requirement should be bigger.
Well, that's fine. We can do some more research on it if you'd like. That was the number we came up with, and
I mean, the ordinance change absolutely necessary from our prior experience, and I think, I mean, I'm all for changing the ordinance, but I think maybe that site size could be a little bit bigger.
Sure. So I guess it's upon the commission how we'd like to act tonight. If you'd like to present something, or if you'd like to hold it, I guess it's up to the commission how they'd like to proceed.
I can make a motion to approve with amending the site area requiring a minimum of 4 acres.
Got a motion on the floor to
Second.
and a second, yeah, to approve modifying the minimum site area requirement for section 19-4 A and B to 4 acres. Any other discussion? Call the roll.
Karpenko,
Yes.
Keller,
Yes.
Neither,
Yes.
Wagonist,
Yes.
Wetzler,
Yes.
Barch,
Yes.
Burning,
Yes.
Bollinger, Demakis,
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Motion is carried. All right, thanks, commissioners. Appreciate it. We do need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second? Anybody second? Everybody in favor say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.